A funky chronograph, a rough and rugged GMT, a diver that never was, and a Speedmaster that should not be. It's episode 96 of A Week in Watches, a bi-weekly look back at new releases and interesting stories from the watch industry. I'm Zach Weitz, let's talk watches. So last week I said that it would likely be some time before we saw more releases, and well, I was wrong, because brands have kept them coming, including Omega, and boy is that one a doozy. So this week I cover the tail end of the newness. It's also the last episode of 2024, and I'm taking a breather for a few weeks, so A Week in Watches won't be back until the end of January. The holidays are around the corner, which means those awkward gifts of ugly sweaters, not actually funny socks, and things you already got yourself are on their way. Once the family goes home and you're able to make your returns, head over to winupwatchshop.com to find yourself something you really want. Even better, if you're around New York City, set up a time to stop by the new Brooklyn showroom. Okay, let's kick this episode off with a few fast releases before I get into my main rant, literally. Brew Watches has released a new version of its highly successful metric model, and well, it's pretty super. As a refresher, the metrics are vintage-inspired 36mm cushion-cased chronographs with sleek lines for an integrated bracelet look. But while most integrated bracelet sports watches go for well-trodden luxury bravado, the metric is understated, industrial, and unique. Powered by Seiko Mecha Quartz movements and surprisingly well finished, they are a solid and fun sub-$500 offering. The new models, called the Super Metrics, take the retro theme into funkier territory. A rethinking of the dial, the subdials have been changed from circles into wide rectangles with off-center axes, putting the sub-seconds and minute totalizer hands at odd, almost jarring locations. The fun continues with graphic elements like a series of lines that just add panache, to a vibrant use of color to larger loom plots. Combined with a chapter ring with big numerals, the Super Metrics take on a fun and quirky personality that is reminiscent of some of the odder Seiko chronographs from the 70s. There are 4 colors available: electric blue, burnt orange, lumina yellow, and royal blue, each priced at $475. Chicago's Oak and Oscar have created a toolier take on their Humboldt GMT with a new edition designed in collaboration with the St. Louis County Rescue Squad, aptly called the Humboldt GMT SAR for search and rescue. With the tough conditions these brave men and women face in mind, Oak and Oscar rethought the Humboldt to suit their needs better. The result is still 40mm with 200 meters of water resistance, featuring an anti-magnetic enclosure and anti-shock bumper, but is now crafted from grade 5 titanium. Additionally, the metal 24-hour insert has been swapped with a loomed ceramic compass bezel. The dial and bezel are matching matte blue. Instead of automatic GMT at 6, the dial now just says SAR, and one other difference is that the minutes index is now orange. Powered by the Sellita SW330 automatic GMT, the Humboldt GMT SAR includes 2 straps, one canvas and the other rubber, and is priced at $2,350. This is a limited edition of 50 pieces that are sure to go quickly. The world of watches has gone from vintage-inspired to revisionist history, with an emerging trend of watches that take real concepts and spin them off into fantastical territory. Currently at the vanguard of this trend is Massena Labs, who earlier this year teamed up with Albishorn for a what-if version of a regatta chronograph from the 1930s. Well, Massena is back again, this time teaming up with Vulcain to imagine what would a Vulcain nautical cricket introduced in the 50s, rather than the 60s, look like today, so aged. Why do this? Well, why not? That's not the point. Anyway, for those unfamiliar, the Nautical Cricket is a remarkable and significant dive watch that featured a rotating dial system that can be used to determine no-stop decompression dive times based on the length and depth of the dive, as well as an audible alarm system. For the Massena version, the dial has been turned a rich, slightly metallic, tropical brown, simulating a watch that has gotten a lot of sun. The hands are entirely different, with a new and unique hour and minute set and an enlarged alarm indicator. All are filled with beige loom for intentional photina. Loomed triangular plots have been added to the chapter ring, replacing the 3, 6, and 9 of the original. Certainly an attractive take on the nautical cricket. My one question would be why it actually seems like a slightly more effective design given the large amount of loom than the model that would follow it 10 years later. But hey, I wasn't alive back then. The Vulcain Nautical Legacy Massena Labs is powered by the in-house Cricket caliber V10, measures 42mm in diameter and 17.5mm thick, that's with a specially designed resonant caseback. It's limited to a mere 25 pieces available through massenalab.com and it's priced at $4,950. Omega makes me wonder what it means to be a Speedmaster. There's one thing that is very clear about the Omega Speedmaster line. It's that it's a versatile format. It covers everything from historically accurate or at least rooted watches like the Moon Watch or the first Omega in space, to pieces of luxury ostentation like the Dark Side of the Moon or frankly anything solid gold, to models that are closer to speculative fiction like the multi-metered automatics that suggest a speedy history that just never was. It's a racing watch that became a watch for astronauts, and now, based on the newest model, is also a pilot's watch, which has historical grounding as Speedies were also worn by NASA test pilots. Well, just last week, Omega announced a semi-surprising new model, semi because it was leaked a few months ago in a similar fashion as Daniel Craig leaking new models by wearing them to high-profile outings. Regardless, the new model, cleverly dubbed the Speedmaster Pilot, is, well, an oddball. A mix of new and old with some unexpected references tossed in, the Speedmaster Pilot is effectively a new Speedy format, sporting a street-lugged case with a 40.85mm diameter. This is close to the 57 line, which is 40.5, but the profile seems slightly different, likely accounting for the automatic caliber 9900, which also brings the thickness to 14.7mm. Similarly, the 9900 is typically only found in the larger 44.25mm racing models. The case is fully brushed, which is uncommon for a Speedy, features a tall boxed sapphire crystal emulating Hesalite, and a tapered crown, which is perhaps the most uncommon element, likely referring to onion crowns as, this is a pilot's watch. The caseback is solid, just featuring a simple seahorse medallion, vintage nod, and has a water resistance of 100 meters. So yes, all you folks who think you can't go out in the rain with a 50-meter moon watch can stop your whining. Okay, so it's a smaller, straight-lugged automatic Speedy. Weird, but kind of a missing model for the sake of catalog completionism. But then the dial and bezel go into far stranger territory, mixing enthusiast cues with overt aviation details. Starting with the bezel, it's a riff on the 57 bezels with tachometer base 1000 in orange and dot over 90 mark, so pure vintage. The dial, however, is much more modern. A dual register layout with stacked hour and minute totalizers at 3, the surface is a stippled matte black surrounded by a brushed rhodium chapter ring with what appears to be engraved black hash marks. This is an attractive and toolish combo. Departing entirely from the historic, the typical long rectangular Speedmaster hour markers have been made out of molded superluminova, including the 2 dots at 12. Each hour marker also features a hit of bright orange on its outer edge for daytime legibility. While these are cool details that should make the watch glow well, they are about as modern as you can get. And this brings me to the subdials at 3 and 9. Both proportionally large for the dial, which looks good, they are deep set and feature a glossier finish. The stacked chronograph counter at 3 has an hour index on its inner surface and a 60-minute index on its outer ring. It's clean and legible, though the minute index lacks any numerals, which could have helped with at-a-glance legibility. There's a curious little bracket-like shape on the minutes index, which is meant to look like a burn rate indicator found in cockpits. So not a functional detail at all. I'll get back to that. At 9, you'll find the active sub-seconds dial with hash marks on the beveled region and a colorful graphic on the lower surface that's half blue, half black, outlined in yellow and white, and features a crosshair. Clearly, it's meant to evoke more cockpit imagery, such as an altitude indicator. This and the burn rate bracket, while perhaps visually appealing or at least striking, are literal, non-functional details that just don't belong on a Speedmaster, or really anything that is claiming to be functional, which, as you likely noticed, this has claimed with the rather noticeable flight-qualified text under the logo. These are details that you will literally find on some Bell & Ross models that are, frankly just meant to be graphic and fun. Lastly, we have the hands. The hour and minute hands are straight swords with edge-to-edge loom rather than loomed fill. This makes me think of classic tool chronos like Porsche Orfinas, Tutimonados, Sins, etc., but not Speedies, which are typically thinner and filled in. That said, the wider proportions do bring a certain reference to mind that I will touch on in a moment for dramatic effect. In terms of the design, however, the heavy loom application coordinates with the molded loom blocks. The chrono seconds hand is black with an orange airplane-shaped tip. Now I need a moment here. Do things ever get you irrationally annoyed? Like, you know it shouldn't bother you, and yet a little detail irritates some deeply rooted sensibility you hold? Well, this is one of mine. The plain-tipped hand should serve one of two purposes. It can be used to distinguish a central minute counter from a seconds counter, such as with Lemania 5100 powered watches, or used as a pointer date. And this brings me back to the wide hour minute hands. There is a Speedmaster with an orange-tipped airplane hand. The Speedmaster reduced triple calendar automatic reference 3820.53, aka the Mark 40. A watch that was catapulted into the enthusiast consciousness by the Hodinkee Speedmaster LE from 2018. You might be saying, but Zach, the Hodinkee LE uses a plain-tipped Chronos seconds hand too. Are you sure you want to say this out loud? And guess what? That annoys me too, but that watch is meant as a tribute to the Mark 40, as it has personal significance to Ben Clymer. So as a detail, it made sense to keep. It wasn't about airplanes. And now that I've brought that LE to attention, I'm starting to think the similarities are not accidental between it and the Speedy Pilot. In addition to the hand, the sub-seconds on the Hodinkee LE was split black and blue, which was a reference to the 24-hour subdial on the Mark 40. Once again, it served no functional purpose on the limited edition. The Speedmaster Pilot just turns at 90 degrees. Furthermore, the Hodinkee LE was a straight-lug Speedy based on the 39.7mm first Omega in space. The Pilot is a straight lug as well. Makes you think. Like, maybe they are trying to riff off that once successful limited edition again. We're not done with the Speedmaster Pilot yet. The sub-seconds hands are triangular wedges, the minutes in bright orange, the seconds in yellow, and the hours in light gray. This is not the straight sticks of the Moonwatch or the lances of the 57s. So where are these from? Well, in 1969, Omega released a watch that was actually meant for pilots, the aptly named Flightmaster. Unrelated to Speedmasters, the Flightmaster is still one of the coolest vintage chronographs ever, as it featured 2 pushers and 3 crowns. 1 crown for the time, 1 for an internal bezel, and 1 to adjust an independent 12-hour hand. Yes, this was a dual-time chrono, and the only one I can think of with a fully independent hand. The Flightmaster was a pretty radical watch and had the case to match, a massive 44mm hunk of steel. But for the sake of relevance to the Speedmaster Pilot, the chronograph hands were all wedge-shaped and were available in orange as a standard or bright yellow by special request. Clearly, that's an intentional reference. Okay, I've got to wrap this up. The Speedmaster Pilot also has a date at 6, why not? A brushed 3-link bracelet, the same design as the 57s, and is a coaxial master chronometer, as you'd expect. It's priced at $9,500, so a pretty penny, and appears to be available now. So look, I know that came off kind of critical, which it was. The back and forth dance between vintage and modern, purposeful and literal, kind of makes my head spin. And in the end of the day, makes the watch feel just like a little half-baked. Pick a lane and go for it. This is already an automatic Speedmaster with a new genre. Just make it a damn good pilot's watch. That said, maybe a watch that is certified by NASA already is. But to take a step back and turn off my pretentious watch nerd brain for a second, it's also a decent looking watch. It likely wears well, if a bit chunky, and while the graphical elements might serve no purpose, they add color in a fun way. There's nothing wrong with liking it, so don't let my ranting dissuade you if this is the Speedy you always wanted. But that's enough of my thoughts. I want to know what you think about this. Am I way off the mark? And that's a wrap for episode 96, as well as 2024. Please like and subscribe. Have an awesome break. We'll be back in 2025.